All right, perfect. Hello, everyone. My name's Amar Amir Sheikh. I'm the head delegate for LUMUN this year. Uh, and thank you for joining us. Let's get right to it. This session is going to be a bit more a focus on the basics of MENs to make sure that majority of you are prepared for it. If anyone's just joining in, please mute yourselves. I'll take questions at the end from you. We'll have plenty of time for that as well. Things we'll start from the very basics, and then I'll go into details alongside. So every aspect that we'll be covering, we'll be also going into details simultaneously. If you have any questions, just note them down, ask me in the end, and just specify on which area you want to cover. Before we get into that, a bit about me. Like you, I've also been part of LUMUN. I've participated in 3 LUMUNs. I've won best delegation as head delegate for LUMUN in my last year for college. I've also participated and won Harvard MUN as well as World MUN. So as one of my last years in Model UN, I'd love to give it back so that you guys, who are now the future of this country and the Model UN platform, can take this activity forward, which is something that has given me a lot to do with. So let's get right to it. I'll share the screen and all right, so perfect. So let's start with very basics. I'll start with the rules of procedure. And within this in itself, I'll start going into details about what aspects you should focus on, what things you need to learn on, how MENs have changed from previous years. So as rules of procedure, the first thing in Model UN itself are motions. Motions are things that you raise in order, are formulated proceedings that you raise in order to move your committee forward. So so let's say on the 5th of January, you have your first session. Whenever you get in and the committee is about to start, all of you will be recognized, but you will have to raise a motion to begin debate. The motion to begin debate is only raised once, which is the very first session of the committee in itself. After that, so whenever you have breaks and you come back in, the motion you will be raising is to commence debate. So you now give a formulated formal version of starting the proceedings of the committee, and then you can take things forward. Lastly, when the last session of the caucus before you go into voting, I'll again go into documentation as well. But when the very last session, when you're done with all the formulated speaking, unmods, so on and so forth, there's one particular motion that we'll raise, which is motion to adjourn debate. When you raise this motion, it means you have formally ended all discussion on the topic at hand. After that, the only thing that's left is voting or amendments, which again, I will explain later on as we get to that part. Second, so after you've started, then you will have general speakers list. General speakers list is non-exhaustive. So if you have spoken once, ideally you should be writing it to the dais. Your respective chairs are going to communicate to you how they want the GSL to be rolling. But as a formulated rule, the GSL should never exhaust, because GSL is the one where you're not restricted by a particular subtopic and you can cover anything that you ideally want to focus on and you would like others to focus on as well, or give direction to the committee in itself. So there's that. And then you have moderated and unmoderated caucuses. Again, I'll be explaining to you moderated and unmoderated caucuses in detail, but basically mods or unmods, whenever you want to raise them, you again raise a motion for that purpose. The last 3 things that you should focus on are the 3 points. Point of parliamentary inquiry is when you have any question about proceedings or any question that you would like to ask this, you would raise a point of parliamentary inquiry. For example, you want to ask what forms of voting inquiry that you have particularly, you ask through a point of parliamentary inquiry. If you want to leave the session for, let's say you want to take a break for restroom, or you need to attend a phone call or whatever, then you raise a point of personal privilege. And lastly, one thing that's missing from here is point of order. Point of order encompasses whenever the dais has has foregone a particular proceeding or has made a mistake or has forgotten some general proceedings. For example, let's say that two motions were raised. One was for 5 minutes, individual speaking time 1 minute, and the other was for 6 minutes and individual speaking time 1 minute. And the dais voted first on the 5 minute one. Then that's a mistake on our part. So you just simply raise a point of order and say that shouldn't the moderated caucus, which involves more people, be voted on first. So any mistake on our side or anything that sure. So since you guys are private messaging me, I'll ask the USGs after this is done to send you guys this document. I can't send you all this document separately. So what we can do is, send it to all the respective head delegates of institutions, and they can then, share it with the teams. No worries. All right. All right. So that's the point of order. Ideally, so like I said, I should also be. So the purpose I do MENs is I believe MENs are a sport. It's a sporting activity, and therefore the main goal should be to ideally win or compete. It's a competitive activity. So use point of orders smartly. Just don't raise it because in the end the chairs are the ones who will determine your awards. And a big part, given that MEN is a social activity, you should carefully navigate if you should be raising point of order. If it's a general mistake or something, they've made, then definitely do raise it. But if you want to just piss off the chair, then maybe you should think twice about that. So now let's come down on precedence. Precedence is a bit tricky. So I'll explain to you how precedence works. So by what I mean by precedence is, so you raise different forms of motions, but they have to be voted upon, right? And generally, the motion that gets voted on first has a sort of advantage. You could say the same thing about the motion that gets voted in the end as well, but that's a bit more complicated. Those strategies I'll cover tomorrow. But inherently, what I mean by precedence is, so therefore we need a mechanism to ensure statistically which motion gets voted on when. By that rule, it's a very simple way of judging. So whichever moderated caucus or whichever motion incorporates the most number of people, right? The most number of people can participate gets voted on first. So now I'll give you an example. Let's say that the delegation of the United States raised a motion in the Kashmir issue to discuss the humanitarian crisis in Kashmir, all right, for 10 minutes and individual speaking time, 1 minute. And then the honorable delegation of Russia raised the moderated caucus to discuss the role of non-state actors in Kashmir for time parameters 15 and individual speaking time 1 minute. By this logic, since Russia's motion incorporates more speakers, 15 compared to USA's 10, we will first vote on Russia's motion, and then if it fails, then we come down to USA's. Similarly, if Russia had raised their motion for 10 minutes, but individual speaking time 45 seconds, then again, Russia gets voted on first because since you have 45 seconds, you will have more than 10 speakers compared to United States motion where only 10 people get to speak. So the higher number of people who get to speak, the higher is the precedence on voting. The second thing is unmoderated caucuses. So unmoderated caucuses take precedence over all other motions. And by all other motions, I mean, let's say that I'll give you an example, the very basic example we give to our chairs as well. You have three motions. One is a motion for an unmoderated caucus for, let's say, 20 minutes. The other is an extension of the previous caucus for 5 minutes. And the third is a consultation of the whole. I'll explain to you guys what consultation of the whole is in case you guys don't know. I'll cover that later on as well. But those are the three main. Let's say we have these three motions. So by precedence, unmod comes first, your consultation of the whole comes second, and your extension of the previous caucus comes third, right? So that's the three precedents. And unmod will always take precedence over other consequent motions. Last thing, extensions for any caucus cannot be more than half of the initial time. So let's say you have a motion for 10 minutes you cannot raise an extension of more than 5 minutes for that particular caucus. Also, for ease of proceedings, the dice usually not only at LUMUN but in competitions such as WorldMun or HarvardMun, all major international competitions, we try to restrict it to maximum, let's say, 5 minutes. For ease of moving the committee forward, because let's say if you have a 15-minute caucus, you can't do a 7.5 7.5 minute extension. So for ease, usually the norm, it's not a rule, but the norm is that we incorporate a 5 minute extension or more. A 5 minute extension, and if the chair is, let's say, accepting a 20-minute moderate caucus, then you can probably move towards a 10-minute extension. So that's precedence. Remember precedents. Precedents are important when it comes to voting proceedings. So keep that in mind. Since all right. So just it's difficult for me to since I'm screen sharing, to navigate on the chat box. So if you can keep your questions till the end, and then I'll take them one by one from you. So that is easy for me, and I can streamline your responses as well. So now comes the important part. What is a general speakers list? The general speakers list can be defined as one of the most important things in a model UN. Why? Because general speakers list give you the firm background and the basis for your performance for the next 5 days. Uh, I'll first explain to you the rules of the GSL, and then I'll get into a bit more technical details of what we should be planning for your GSL and so on and so forth. First things first, like I mentioned before, general speakers list are non-exhaustive. So if a general speakers list ends, let's say there are no more names to continue on the GSL, then ideally that committee by rules in itself has failed, right? Because then you end the committee if no more discussion is being taken into account. So always keep the GSL rolling again. So you keep your name on the GSL, and in the event that a lot of people are speaking, it's better for you. You get more speaking time, you get more speaking opportunities. It's the first thing that's established. So, like I said, based on the motions that you'll be raising, it's the first thing that's established. You raise a simple moderate caucus. Uh, let's say that the delegation of China has been recognized. So you will just say, thank you, honorable ambassadors. The delegation of China would like to raise a moderate caucus to establish the GSL for time parameters 1 minute or 1 minute 30 seconds. In GSL, you never give the overall time because you never restrict it. It's non-exhaustive, like I previously said. You just determine the speaking time, and the time that's determined stays the same for the next 5 days or uh, for the duration of the conference. All right. So in GSLs, there are three things you can do. So let's say you are speaking for 1 minute 30 seconds, and you end your speech at 1 minute 10 seconds. So you just don't say thank you, chair, and sit back. You have three rules of procedures or three powers that you can utilize. One is you can yield the time to the floor or back to the chair, which means, all right, thank you, that's it. My speech is done. The second thing is, hmm, the second thing that you can do is just give us 1 second. I guess I'll have to take back control because some people are still kids. Just give us 2 minutes and we'll. All right, perfect. Let's go ahead. Right, let me screen share once more, and let's get back to it. 1 second. All right, perfect. So we were at GSL. All right, so ensure that you give the individual speaking time. I was talking about yields. Remember, again, write this down because this is something that people get confused on. GSL is the only time you can yield in. No moderate caucuses involve yields. So if you end your speaking time before, you just sit back down. There are no more further yields in a GSL. In a moderate caucus. Again, coming back to yield. So one is yielding back to the chair, you're done with the speeches. The other thing is you yield your time for questions, which then means your time is stopped for that particular second. The chair asks who wants to, the chair asks, one second, the chair asks, the delegations present to raise their placards and then randomly select whoever they will ask you a question. And then the remaining time that you have, you'll have that time to answer their particular questions. And the last is to yield your time to a particular delegation. So let's say I'm USA and I'm working together with, let's say, Botswana. So I would speak for like, let's say 50 seconds. And then I would be like, thank you, Honorable Chair. The Honorable Delegation of the United States would like to yield the remaining time to the Honorable Delegation of Botswana. So they have the remaining time that you had left on your GSL. They get to speak for it. Again, I'm just not telling you guys to, I'm not giving a particular example. All right. I'll give a brief overview as well. No worries. Now I'll tell you why GSLs are important and how you should strategically place yourselves in. I'll explain more of the strategy in tomorrow's session because that's a bit more for advanced people. But I'll still expand on what you should be doing. GSL is your first speech that you get in the committee, and every person should ideally have a game plan or end goal that you want to pursue in order to succeed or whatever you want to achieve in a committee. GSL gives you that footing. So make sure your GSL is always prepared beforehand. It should ideally have a good starting and a good ending, right? Because I like the way I train my teams and the way I've been trained as well is there's a very simple metric for assessing if your speech starting and ending is good. Make someone sit and make them play a game on their phone and then give your speech. If your speech makes someone, stop playing a game on the phone and look at you, it means it's disruptive and you've achieved your purpose. That's what I mean by disruptiveness. All right. So people should just be like, oh, someone's speaking, I should listen. Make sure your starting ending is good. But then again, don't flood content or don't go very much into your stance in a GSL. That's the biggest mistake that beginners make. And it has been going on for like 5 or 6 years. You come up, you give your stance and so on and so forth. The stance is not going to be used to make you win for the next 5 days. What one person, and this is how the chairs at LUMUN have been trained, this is how we train our teams as well who go on to compete internationally. There's a very simple metric. Place yourself for the next 5 days using your GSL. If you have a particular solution or a particular angle or something you want to make your block with, or you want to, let's say, focus on an Arab country's block or whatever, right? Make sure you talk about that in your GSL and place it. Because remember, as chairs have a very simple metric as well. We listen to your GSLs. We'll write down, let's say, for example, the delegation of Egypt wants to focus on an Arab-led solution. And then we'll be like, okay, on day 3, if we are checking back to GSLs, if you have given your stance, it doesn't help us. But if you have talked about Arab-led solution, and then you made a block on the 3rd day on an Arab-led solution, you just have a very likelihood of winning, right? Because you can now see the dots connecting. That's how important GSLs are. By placing yourselves, by just bringing in stances or talking about things that are going on in the topic, that's the amateur beginner mistakes that a lot of people make. Move yourself in the driver's seat, give the chair what you want to talk about, give the delegates what you want to work with them, and then that's it. End the speech. That's all that's needed in GSL. Also, another thing that people make mistake. So I'll give you the general parameters, and this is not restricted. So one of the ways you can give a GSL is, again, there are a lot of different speaking styles. I'll cover them tomorrow as well, because there are a lot of different types of people who speak in a lot of different ways. But overall, there are the biggest and the easiest method to master and learn is just 15 seconds of starting rhetoric, then you spend around 45 seconds, 45 to let's say 55 seconds on your main content, and then you just end with 15 seconds rhetoric, right? Or 15 seconds of something disruptive. You can determine that for yourself. If you want to take this a bit more advanced, then the more advanced version is 15 seconds rhetoric, 20 seconds problems, 30 seconds your main solution, again, I talked about. And then lastly, again, 20 to 15 seconds on your ending rhetoric. And that's the most basic method to follow for performing well or giving your GSL well. What information should your GSL contain? Yeah, so like I was talking about, your focus less on information and focus more on what you want to achieve from the session, right? So there's always an angle that you should be pursuing or a goal that you should be pursuing, and that's pretty much it, right? And then focusing on irrelevant information or talking about the topic at hand or talking about let's say, for example, what's going on in the world regarding your topic, that's just wasting a very good opportunity to perform well, right? You lay your foundations to the GSL to make sure that you utilize it effectively. Now let's come down to moderate caucuses. Like I said, so I'll explain to you the philosophy behind moderate caucuses. Mods are basically subtopics to make sure that the discussion is not all over the place, but targets precisely what needs to be discussed. So let's say that you have the Israel-Palestine issue. Israel-Palestine issue is a very big one, right? So you just can't have discussion on Israel-Palestine because it's going to be all over the place. You can talk about anything. So then you break it down into moderate caucuses. For example, one mod can be the issue of Jerusalem. The other moderate caucuses can be the role of non-state actors. Third can be mechanisms for achieving a two-state solution. Fourth can be mechanisms to deal with Hamas. Right. So the four moderate caucuses that I've just made up right now in my mind are the four ways to divide the topic in itself into subtopics. So that's what you intend to do with moderated caucuses. The way that chairs assess mods are, one is obviously your speech, but the other metric is also how many moderate caucuses you've been able to pass. Why? Because moderate caucuses are the way you move the formal discussion forward, right? So, like I said, there's the Israel-Palestine issue, but which delegation was the one that made the committee focus more on solving it by dividing it into subtopics, right? So if you have a square and you cut it down into smaller proportions, it's easier to deal with than just having a big, large problem at hand. So yeah, pass more moderate caucuses. Also, a good thing about passing moderate caucuses is that you guarantee your speech. So let's say general assemblies, you have general assemblies, which are like what, 80, 90, 100 people. In that way, you secure a chance to speak, right? Because if your mod passes, you get to pass. One thing that we should remember, again, it depends on the chair, but whenever you raise a moderate caucus and your mod passes, you have the opportunity to ask the chair to speak last. Note that when we say the opportunity to speak last, it's not because you don't have any research on it and because you get to listen to everyone's speeches and then make something up. No. So getting to speak last is strategically extremely important because you get to listen to all the people and then you get to strategically place yourself in a way which will help you, right? So again, I'll explain more of this in tomorrow's session, but right now, just remember that whenever your mod passes, you have the opportunity to ask the chair if you could get to speak at the last of the moderate caucus. Otherwise, you get to give the first speech. So both ends are available to you if your mod passes. In moderate caucuses, you can discuss anything from problems, solutions, definitions. Even if you are coming back from an unmod, you can have proceedings of the unmod. And in proceedings of the unmod, you can talk about who you're working with, whatever. So it's anything can be discussed in moderate caucuses as long as it's pertaining to the topic or pertaining to the committee in itself. One mistake that I've seen over the years that people make is that they'll first talk about problems of Israel Palestine, and then you'll be like solution of Israel Palestine, right? Those two are one of the biggest blunders that people make, because what are you trying to achieve by problems and solutions to? I mean, those two are the only things that actually are matter in the topic. So like I say, break it down structurally, and then raise moderate caucuses. So rather than saying problems and then solutions to Israel Palestine, you can talk about historical inefficiencies in the Israel Palestine solution, or you can talk about previous resolutions in the Israel Palestine definitions. You can talk about methods to provide humanitarian aid in Gaza. These are better moderate caucuses compared to just say problems or solutions or whatever, right? So make sure that if you want to be a good delegate and you want to drive discussion forward, you raise smart moderate caucuses. But then the second most important thing are don't raise too smart moderate caucuses. And this is for like everything, for LUMUN, for Worldman, HMAN, if you go to international conferences, this applies everywhere. If you raise moderate caucuses that are too smart for people, they're not going to pass. Why? Because, I'm coming to moderated unmod position paper. I'll explain all of this. If you can just, hold on. So ideally, you should be going for raising moderate caucuses that people have research on and that are very easy to understand. Methods, here are two moderate caucuses, right? Methods to facilitate arbitration between non-state actors in Israel-Palestine. That's one moderate caucus versus communication mechanisms in Israel-Palestine. The other one is much more easier to understand and read compared to the previous one, and you should ideally focus on that. That's pretty much all that you need to know for moderate caucuses. If you have questions, note them down. I'll answer them. But yeah, ideally raise simpler mods, make sure they pass, move the committee forward. Also, general rule, always make sure that you have raised your hand at all times, whenever the chair is asking, because it gives a good impression to the chair as well, that this person is always ready to speak. Even if you're spoken, raise your placard again. Because again, it's a social competition, and these nuances, these technicalities work a lot in the mind of the chairs themselves as well. All right. So let's come to, let me do unmodded caucuses first, and then we can do, all right. So unmods are probably the most misunderstood activity in Pakistan in itself, right? Because you guys think that unmods are something where the person who talks the most wins, or the person who's the most vocal, or who has spent the most time talking in a 15-minute unmod is the one who's doing the best, right? First things first, I think that's the biggest mistake that people make, and that's the first thing that you should take out of your mind. Unmods are not equal to speaking the most. In my 7 years of doing ambience, I've never spent more than 3 minutes in a particular, not more than 2 minutes in a particular unmod of, let's say, 10 or 15 minutes talking, right? Why? Because unmods are very strategically placed yourself. If you keep on talking, it's just what you're trying to show is you're not collaborative at all. What you should be ideally focusing on is ensuring people come together based on your solutions or what your proposals, and you're the one who's bringing everyone together, right? And you're the one who's influencing people, not putting them down or cutting their clauses, which is obviously not allowed. If any of that happens, your award and your delegation probably gets cancelled based on whatever rules of the respective conferences. But unmods are for you to make blocks where like-minded people can come together, and all your job is to, one, ensure that whatever solutions you have proposed are in there, and number two, whatever solutions you have proposed have influenced other delegates or have helped other delegates come to a consensus. That's it. That's the two things that one should focus on in an unmod. Talking the most, or cutting people down, interrupting, interjecting people, being aggressive, all of that doesn't get you anywhere. Not at Berlin, not at HMAN or at LUMUN either, right? Because MENs have moved way ahead, and these are the mistakes that people still make. And you're not going to get an award. And then people come at the end and be like, oh, I talked the most or I was the most vocal. Why didn't I get an award? Why? Because you, number one, have gone against the very principles of MEN, which is convincing people, influencing them, but simultaneously also being collaborative and helping them come to a consensus, right? So if you are doing all three things and just talking over people or being overtly aggressive, then you basically have gotten rid of the entire purpose of Unmods. Now, what? So that's one thing. Unmods. If you are very beginner, or let's say this is your first MEN, so I'll give you a brief background of Unmods. Just one second. I'll give you a brief background of Unmods. So let's say your moderate caucuses you have raised 3 or 4 moderate caucuses, and you have achieved you have had substantive discussion on the topic at hand. The next thing that you should now be looking for is to talk with each other, right? Because what's the end goal of a particular model range committee? Not taking crisis into account. Right now, just talking about ECOSOCs and general assemblies. The inherent goal of a committee is to come up towards a document which attempts to solve the problem. That's it, right? That's all your efforts are designed for. That end document that you produce, which will attempt to solve that problem. And in an unmod, to pass that document, you need people working together. And those people working together need to have a higher than simple majority, which will ensure that your document passes. So if you have had enough moderate caucus discussion, that you have heard enough ideas from other people, then ideally what you should be going for is an unmodded caucus. Unmods have no formal structure in itself, right? So you can talk with anyone you want. Given that it's online, so you'll have different breakout rooms. You can go to different breakout rooms, have one-on-one conversations with people, convince them, talk to them, listen to the solutions. But there's basically no. As long as you are one, not aggressive, two, not interjecting people just for the sake of interjecting people, being rude, or doing anything that's beyond the barriers of being a respectful delegate, then obviously there will be repercussions against your performance and you. But ideally, the unmods are for informal discussions. Through an unmod, you'll have people who will form blocks together, which are like-minded people working together. Within those blocks, you will have certain leaders who have contributed a bit more share, who influenced more, who have influenced the document more and influenced the conversations in the unmod a bit more. And then in the end, awards are determined on the unmod side from those leaders, right? So let me give you an example. Let's say that we are having a discussion on the Kashmir issue, right? And I'm in a block with 7 people, and all of them are talking. We have a 15-minute unmod. All I have to say is I'll be like, all right, so great solution, guys. I think so you have proposed this. Maybe we can introduce this, which brings all of our solutions together. It solves all our contentions, and let's start documenting. That's all I'll say, right? And obviously filling in the solutions. I haven't given you a particular solution right now, but that's the general idea. Bring everyone together. If there are any contentions between them, solve that. Bring people together, start documentation, and my job is done. I don't need to speak more. I spoke for 1 minute 30 seconds, and I've already achieved my goal. So that's first thing. The second thing is obviously that in model UNs, when you're making blocks together at the start, there will be smaller blocks, right? Because people like to participate, people like to speak. Just 1 second, give me 1 second, right? So people like to speak, and obviously there's a lot of if there are more people, smaller circles form. In the end, like I said, always view model UN from just one perspective. That is coming to an end point where one document will attempt to solve the situation or the problem at hand. To pass that document, you need a simple majority. Obviously, there are people who do not have. There are blocks which in themselves don't form a simple majority, right? So let's say we have a committee of 70 people. We have one block that is 15, other block that's let's say 18. And another block that's let's say 17, so on and so forth. In order for you to form, in order for you to actually make sure your document passes, you need to bring merges together. And that's where mergers come in. So mergers are another thing that one second. Mergers are another thing that unmods are designed for, where different blocks come together after working papers are introduced and then attempt to solve the problems or questions at hand. One second, right? All right. So that's mergers. How you want to conduct mergers is something I'll be covering tomorrow, because that's a bit more advanced and requires different strategies that you can use. So I wouldn't want to go in today on how you should conduct mergers or how you should place yourself in mergers. But ideally, that's so the mergers are another thing you can do. And I've already talked about established leadership. Again, extremely important. Establishing leadership does not mean that you're the most aggressive or you're the one who's talked the most. Uh, Establishing leadership just means that people look up to you for inspiration, and your solutions are the ones that are driving your particular block's trajectory forward. And you're the person that has placed themselves in a way that people come to you, listen to you, or you're the one who's trying to solve and bring people together, right? That's the goal of Unmods, and that's how we determine uh, uh, who's leading an actual Unmod. All right. So consultation of the whole. I think I got this question in the chat as well. That can you? Yes, this recorded session will be accessible to the delegates. Uh, all right. So consultation of the whole. I think I got this in the chart as well. A consultation of the whole is also called a moderated unmod. The way you raise a consultation of the whole or a moderated unmod is quite simple. You stand up and you'd be like, like any moderate caucus, you just be like, thank you, Honorable Chair. The delegation of Switzerland would like to raise a moderate caucus, would like to raise a motion for a consultation of the whole for time parameters 10 or 15 minutes, whatever, right? Uh, Based on that premises, how a consultation of the whole goes is the person who raises the motion speaks first. There's no time limit on how much they can speak. You just set the overall time limit. So it's the opposite of GSL, where you in GSL you just set the individual time limit. In consultation of the whole, you just set the overall time limit. Uh, let's say that I'm the first speaker. I speak for 1 minute. Then what I do is I recognize the person who gets to speak next. So then let's say I choose the delegation of India. India gets to speak. Again, they don't have any time constraints. Once they end, they speak, they recognize the speaker, and this process continues till the overall time for the consultation of the whole is collapsed. Again, so one mistake that a lot of beginners or people who are just trying out or starting out make is that they spend a lot of time on consultation of the whole. And trust me, if you think that speaking for 2 minutes or 3 minutes is the best way forward, then you're doing the negative of what is expected from a consultation of the whole. The ideal thing to do in a consultation of the whole is just to speak for 40 to 45 seconds, depending on where the situation or where the committee is. So, for example, if your working papers have been introduced and have been discussed, if I was to give a consultation of the whole speech, I would just stand up. I would thank everyone's working papers. I would be like, this is where we stand. This is the point of view of this block. These are our similarities. This is the difference. One way we think we can solve this difference is through this solution. We would love to hear what they think, and I would give it to their block leader or their block members. That's it. 50 seconds, khatam. I've achieved what I wanted to. Now, the entire discussion of a merger is going to be based on what I initiated, right? So that's how one should think about how to position yourself. Again, Model UN is like a game. So just don't, think of from it in a very linear perspective that there's just one way we can do well. There are millions of ways that one can do well in a model UN. You just need to figure out which one works for you. And please don't speak for 3 minutes in a consultation of the whole. Let others speak. Because that's the entire purpose of a consultation of the whole. So that's one thing. And that's pretty much it. You can use it to establish strategic partnerships, blogs. I'll explain all of this tomorrow because this is getting technicalities. But yeah, that's what your ideal goal for a consultation of the whole is. All right, so position papers, I'm not sure I've covered. All right, so in this, I've not covered position papers, but just explain consultation of the whole. Yeah, so consultation of the whole is pretty simple. Actually, I'll ask me this at the end. I'll then cover this up. So before we get to working papers, consultation of the whole isn't here. Oh, sorry, position papers aren't here. Since a lot of you are asking, I'll explain position papers and I'll add them before this document is shared with all of your head delegates. Position papers are quite simple. They are designed to uh, give the chair and an understanding of where you're at and what your perspective is from from the perspective of your country. So let's say that again. So I'll give you my example from Security Council last year of Bolman. So we were Russia and we had this. We were in the Security Council. So our position paper was quite simple. The first paragraph is a bit of a historic background and just a basic understanding of the topic from our side, right? From the perspective of Russia. The chair doesn't want a Wikipedia understanding of what's happening. The chair isn't interested. Anyone can open a Wikipedia page and be like, oh, say, yeah, this is going on in the topic. The chair has given you the topic, so they know about the topic already. And they don't want to know if you know about the topic. They want to know if you know the topic from your perspective. So the first paragraph will always cover your own perspective and what historic things have you achieved in relation to the topic. So let's say your voting formats in previous resolution or previous resolutions that you've passed, previous treaties, whatever and so forth, right? So any policies, objectives pertaining to your country in lieu with the topic at hand is something that you should be focusing on in your first paragraph. Just a general brief overview, not to go into too much detail. The second thing that you should focus on is so if your country has been silent on the topic, then it's pretty much simple. Then you just give a brief overview of the topic and try to focus on historical settings or historical policies that will influence you, right? So you're focusing on, let's take Switzerland in the Kashmir issue. So Switzerland and the Kashmir issue is going to be like, 1965 Tashkent showed that bilateral policies work. And then, so you focus on bilateral policies. And then in your next paragraph, which I'm coming down to, you talk about your main solutions, which you want to focus on, right? So first paragraph is just general understanding of the topic from your country's perspective. If your country does not have a stance, you can just give a general overview in line with whatever you want to focus on. The second is important. So the second is the main body. In the main body, try to focus on what your stance is at the present moment and how do you want to achieve a solution or how do you want to move forward in the committee, right? Don't give the particular exact solutions, however. That comes in the third paragraph. Right now, you just talk about which treaties you want to focus on, what the current situation is, and what do you make of it from your perspective, right? Nothing historical, but the exact present moment things that you want to focus on with some brief views. So let's say that you want to focus on this is the humanitarian situation at the present moment, and this is why you want to focus on this humanitarian situation, so on and so forth. By doing this. The main body is inherently where majority of your views on the topic will come in, and then the last paragraph is where you give particular solutions that you want to focus on. Let's say that I want a principle of incentivization or penalization. So I'll be like, we want a principle of incentivization or penalization, which will focus on clause A, clause B, clause C, and that is pretty much it. Also, whenever you're doing documentations which are not formal, for example, draft resolutions, you can explore yourself, right? So you can add a bit of word art, you can add pie charts or whatever just to make it fun. Because think of it from a chair's perspective, right? So we have a chair of, let's say, Spec Paul or let's say Dissec or Socum, and they have 110 kids, which means if it's double delegate, then that's 220 kids. They have to listen to them for 5 days, and at the same time, the chair needs to read 100 position papers. So again, the content stands out, yes, but if there are 99 position papers which are just text, and then there's one which has a pie chart on it, or which has, of course, a silent country can talk about I'll get to positioning a bit more ahead. But yeah, so 100 countries में से अगर 99 में से word text के अंदर अपना वो 3 paragraph लिख दिए and one of them brought in pie charts or word art or whatever, to make it a bit more fancy, then obviously that one, being completely honest, it's going to be remembered, right? And you're going to remember the delegate as well. One thing that we did in the Security Council last year was that whenever we had, so I'll ask me the questions at the end. So last year as Security Council, what we did was that we, whichever document we were sending, we would attach Putin and a bear's picture together. So the chair always remembered that, oh, these boys are here. Remember that onions are also a fun activity, right? So you should enjoy yourself. Just don't treat it as an academic process. The chairs are also there to have fun. So keep a good balance between it. I'll go more into reading chairs tomorrow because that's a very important aspect of MVNs themselves. But yeah, so let's focus on working papers. Like I said, are your initial documents. So working papers are your initial documents, which the initial blocks come together to form, and can be do not need to have a particular structure, right? They can be talking about anything pertaining to the topic at hand, but you don't have to write them with preambles or operative clauses. You can make it. You can, again, like position papers, you can add word art in it. You can add pie charts. You can add histograms. You can add those spider webs which break down the solutions. All of these things can be added. Again, it depends on whether your chair likes it or not, which is something that's on you to determine. I'm just telling you what can happen and cannot, right? So every chair has a different take on model UNs. Like I said, UNs are not just one linear thing; they're very expansive. So read your chair. If you think they will like pie charts, something, that's something you can try ahead with, right? But if working papers are there, let me give you an example of a working paper. So this, so this is, you can see this as a working paper. It's much more structured because now at the level we are in, personally, this is from the Security Council last year. But the level that we are in, we just, now it's easy for us to structure things down, right? Compared to just make it baseless. But yeah, so if you can just, see simple working paper, putting down things that we've discussed, using bold to make sure that the chair reads the important things that we need to focus on. And the other is just, fluff that comes in. Yeah, so this is one. If you want, I can like send you guys examples of draft resolution working papers more. Like you can share them with you. But that's the goal of working paper. Working papers also only require signatories, and this is extremely important that you should remember. Uh, the biggest distinction between working papers and draft resolutions are that working papers can include things that you haven't discussed in the committee up till now, right? But draft resolutions cannot. Draft resolution only needs to have things that have been discussed during the committee proceedings formally in moderated caucuses, or you ideally it should be what has been discussed in moderated caucuses, because Unmods is attempting to bring together things that have been proposed in mods, right? But sometimes the chairs can give leeway and be like, all right, if I've discussed it on mods, it's fine. But anything that has not been discussed cannot come in a draft resolution. So make sure you know that. But anything that's working papers can include anything, because working papers, what we give on the second day, maximum third day, working papers are out. So it's much more easy to put things, because you're going to eventually discuss them ahead as well. And again, it depends on the pace of your committee and how advanced the committee is. So, for example, if you're facing someone like me, I introduce a working paper by the first day's end or the second day's end, because I like to make sure that my block stays strong and we've given out our working paper. The reason I'll give you tomorrow, but so if you come facing me, I would introduce a working paper by the first day's end or maximum second day's first session. But if it's a committee that's going slow, you could even reach the third day and have no working papers. Depends on the overall strength of the committee and overall how well people are performing, right? Just give me 1 minute and let me get back. Right. All right. So working papers are done. If you have how many? Oh, delegates depends on. All right. So given that I spent a lot of time, I how much is left? All right, so we are almost done with today's session as well. There are just a few things left. Let me tell you guys how to make solutions because I remember when I was in grade 10, I had a difficult time coming up with solutions as well. It's quite simple. And this is a trick that I learned very later on, which I hope I would have done earlier on. But this is your solution, right? There are just three things you need to focus on as solution. Number one, what is it targeting? Number two, how is it going to achieve it? And number three is who will facilitate. All right, that's just the three things all you need. So again, let me give you an example with this. So let's focus on uh, recommends addressing terrorism in the region via. So what is it targeting? Urging Pakistan to force blah 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 blah. How is it achieving? Through the Financial Action Task Force, which is already there. Then your sub clauses, this entire thing is focusing on how the solution is going to be implemented, right? The second thing is again, what's being done and how is it going to be implemented. Uh, this does not require financing or how to facilitate it because you've already given a body mentioned over here. But if you read this, it just overall encompasses majority of what you need to know about solution building. Also, yeah, by the way, so you can include titles for your draft resolutions and your working papers, right? So international MUNs have moved forward, and you can like now name your solutions. You can name your draft resolution working papers to make it a bit more fun to pick it up on it, right? Can you elaborate a bit on proceeding? All right, so all right, I'll explain double delegations at the end. We're almost done. Draft resolutions are so draft resolutions need two things. I want you guys to note them down. Draft resolutions are a bit more formal, so you need to focus on preambles and operatives. Preambles are anything that are not formally solutions or structures. So preambles can be, seeking inspiration from Resolution 313, which emphasizes on this, or taking into account growing climate crisis in sub-Saharan Africa, whatever, the general things that you need to focus on, right? Or seeking inspiration from the FATF clause 6, which focuses on blah, blah, blah. So preambles are those generals. If just write have a quick search on Google and you'll find all the preambles and operative clauses there are. And draft resolution, but your operative clauses are structured, which should follow this structure mechanism that I've just given you. One, any solution needs to have three things. What is it attempting to target or solve? How will it solve it? And number three, who is going to facilitate it, right? Because you just keep throwing solutions. Oh, let's form a joint committee to discuss disarmament, or let's make a new commission to combat narcotics. No, right? So, all right, you want to make a new commission. Number one, what is that commission going to do? Second thing, how is that commission going to achieve that? And third thing is how are you facilitating that commission? Is it completely independent? Where is it getting its financing from? Is it under a UN mandated organization? That's the thought process you need to have when you're making a solution. Trust me, if you get the hang of these three things, you can make solutions on your like fingers. You don't even have to now search anymore. The level we are at, and now we just like take a pen, take a paper before our training sessions for international conferences, just make solutions there by there. Because the structure is pretty simple, right? There are just three things you need to know. All you need is the basic idea. Yes. Or if it's, can you talk about JCC and its proceedings? Or JCC and its proceedings, Rohil and I will be giving you a very extensive video. It's going to come out today to get you a complete idea of what we need you guys from. That's going to be extensive in itself. So don't worry about that. So that's draft resolutions, operative structured. All right. So one thing about draft resolutions is that ensure that one, they require, so make sure you understand your chair. Again, like I say, MUNs are very important elements of, getting to know what your chair wants, right? But the entire goal is to either they're only signatories, but if the chair wants, they can ask you to have authors. and so on and so forth. There's just one last thing I'll cover before tomorrow's session, which we can. Tomorrow's session will be like a bit much more advanced, given that today we were just covering out the basics. Presentation and question answers, right? So presentation and question answers. So again, depending on the chair can either have presented like presenters and question answers for both working papers and draft resolutions, or you could just have presenters and question answers for the draft resolution. The goal is quite simple. So in working papers, every member gets to have a certain number of people who can come for presentation and who can come for question answers. For people who go for presentation, one of the biggest mistakes people make are they just read out the clauses, right? And this is something that people at even university level make a mistake of. They just be like, oh, this clause does this clause does this. Being given an opportunity as a presenter is a very powerful tool in itself, right? So if you have the option as a presenter, utilize it, focus on it. One of the ways that you can focus on it is like, you don't even talk about your own solution, talk about what everyone else has pitched in, right? Because like I told you, unmods are not, or being leader is not about talking the most or being overtly aggressive. It's about who is the one that's directly influencing people and bringing everyone together for. And in that motion, under that model, you can very easily come up as a presenter and be like, oh, thank you. Our working paper efficiently incorporates the policy of the United States with blah, 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 blah. And then we also talk about Russia's this plan and da, da, da. So the chair gets to be like, okay, this person is the one that's bringing everyone together. And then at the end, you can bring everyone together with your own solution that, we also focus on this and so on and so forth. Question answers are a bit different. Question answers are, so you will stand and then the opposing blocks will ask the questions and you will have to respond to them. Just make sure that if your own block's working paper is in question, right? Don't make the mistake of raising a placard to ask questions. That just looks, perception-wise, it's bad, right? It's a bad move to make. If it's your opposing block, if it's your own block's person who's answering questions, you should not be the one who's asking questions. All right, it's for the opposition block's job to do that. So the number of so apart from that, how to ensure everyone gets to speak and question answers, that's something I'll cover tomorrow. But overall, that is pretty much it for our session today. I'll take questions in the chat. Try to structure them. Oh, do we need to submit position papers? I'm sorry, I can't answer that. That depends on your respective chairs, and you can ask that in your Facebook groups. I think Facebook groups have been sent out to all delegations. Their head delegates, or not sure, but they have been sent out. So all those who had sent a question, if you can send those questions again, so that it's easy for me to understand, to prioritize. One second. Right? Will delegates be automatic? All right. Will delegates be automatically added? No. So GSL, the chair will ask you to raise your placards, and then then the chair themselves chooses. In case you're not called up for a GSL or your name hasn't been written, just write a chit. So now we are in an online one, so just send a private message to the dais, or just ask the chair, what's the procedure, and then they'll tell you. But just try to private message the ACD and they'll add you on the GSL. We have to submit a position paper before committee session. I'm not sure about that. I can't answer that because that's based on your respective chairs. Every chair has a different way to run the committee. If you haven't been accepted into your Facebook group, if Sakina or the USGs are here, maybe they can tell you about the process. But ideally, just ask your head delegate. Yeah, Sakina, please go ahead.
Okay, so hello everybody. Just want to clarify about position papers and Facebook groups. So do keep sending in requests for Facebook groups. Your chairs are expecting them. We're getting a lot of requests, so ek-ek karke the chairs are accepting. And as for position papers, we have already sent out an email with all the details for position papers to your head delegates. So please contact your head delegates regarding the deadline and the email accounts over which you have to send the position papers, and each committee has a different email account. That's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Sakina. Sakina is the Under Secretary General for Crisis and Specialized Agencies. Thank you for that. All right. So you need two position papers. If you have two topics, again, Sakina, I think answer that. You have your guidelines. Could I explain position papers to you? Position papers are pretty simple. Your first paragraph should involve uh, the topic's understanding or your understanding of the topic from the perspective of the country. Excuse me. The second paragraph should be more about solutions and intentions, solutions and what you intend to do in the committee in itself, or talk about areas that you want to focus on. For example, you want to focus on financial mechanism. You want to talk about previous. You want existing bodies or treaties that are in place and how you would like to change that, so on and so forth. But don't give any precise solutions or clauses form because uh, just give what you intend to do in the committee or what your perspective or policy intention is. And then at the last paragraph, just focus on any particular clauses that you want to focus on or any particular solution that you want. That's one way of going about the position paper. But position papers can be much more flexible, right? You can tweak around in ways. You can even introduce word art or whatnot. So they are pretty tech. They are flexible. You don't need to be worried. Oh, I didn't do a particular thing, so is my position paper bad? So will delegates be automatically? Oh, 1 second. All right. How do we work? How do we work on solutions if the country represent doesn't acknowledge the issue and doesn't ratify UN conventions or treaties? So I think about Shamse, your question. So how do we work on solutions if the country we represent doesn't acknowledge the issue is quite simple. I'll give you my example. You were Russia in Kashmir last year Security Council. As Russia, we don't believe that the Security Council should even discuss Kashmir. So we were quite simple. Uh, you talk about areas where you can work and you talk about areas where you can't work, right? So you quite simply, and the way you to go about that is to have very tight arguments regarding that. So let's say that we are talking about Kashmir and why Kashmir should be part of the Security Council. The defense is that it's largely a bilateral issue. It comes under law of Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties. It's a bilateral issue. You can't internationalize it, and you would have an argument for that. Similarly, if you aren't ratifying particular UN convention or treaties, then you need to have arguments why you aren't doing so. Right. One mistake that people make is they get defensive immediately. They're like, "Oh, maybe we'll ratify this if you do this, this, this." The first things first. On the first and second days, you shouldn't be giving your ground either side. You should hold tight. You should be like, "Okay, so this is why we are ratifying these treaties or conventions. Instead of focusing here, let's focus on what we can actually achieve because our foreign policy restrictions means we aren't going to vote no. You are trying to convince something that's not going to give any victory. So let's instead focus on things that can actually be done and we can work on. So you move the discussion towards things that you can talk about and stay away from discussions that you can't. Again, you can't avoid blocks being formed based on these treaties, which you can't be part of. But then you can get people together based on other things. For example, focusing on things that you agree with. Let's again giving you example of Kashmir. You can focus on humanitarian crisis, and you can focus on how to solve it bilaterally instead of making it part of SCN. You can make a block on that. So again, I don't know your topic, and I can't really give you based on topic because that would be unethical. But giving you a way to go about this. All right. So all right. In a double delegate committee, how would you go about the GSL? I mean, it's up to you. There are a lot of ways you can give a GSL in a double delegate committee. I mean, so one way you can give is that both of you can give a GSL. That's how we train our LUMUN members as well to, let's say 45 seconds each, 45 seconds each, if it's a 1 minute 30, and it's very impactful as well. Because obviously, like different people speaking, just having a good connectivity. But on other ways, you can be like, is one person is speaking, the other person is in the unmoderated caucuses. That's a good division as well. Again, these are very flexible things. If you get recognized, both of you can speak, one of you can speak. That's irrelevant as long as the speech is good or the content you've covered. Double delegates are pretty much simple, very like they're pretty simple in this manner. Uh, the brief details about PCRC, I can't give you that. I'm sorry. You'll have to email your committee chairs for that. When to submit working paper. Again, when to submit working paper. So I'll give you guys a tip just at the start of the session or somehow just ask the chair, through a point of parliament inquiry, by which session at the earliest can you be expecting a working paper? Because like I said, I can't tell you a brief because every chair has a different vision for running the committee. And if whatever they say, that means that's when you can start introducing. Again, a mistake that people make is, they wait for people to start introducing working paper. You shouldn't wait. You should just take the initiative. And if you have a block, you have a working paper, then why are you waiting for? Just go ahead and give it. What is the marking points criteria? Again, that is dependent upon respective chairs themselves. I can't give you the uh, exact, marking criteria. What I can tell you is what the way I've given you this session is the same way we train people in LUMUN, and those people are your chairs. So what I'm telling you guys right now is pretty similar to what I'm telling them as well. So yeah, how do we work on solutions if the country represent? Yeah. So I did this. The links have expired. How many speeches should be there? Again, how many speeches should be there depends on the chair. You should be just focusing on giving as many speeches as you can. Also, only one. No. So motions are raised throughout each sessions. So I'll give you the time boundaries. No motion can be longer than 20 minutes and shorter than 5 minutes. So let's say that a mod was passed on discussing two-state solution in Israel-Palestine for 15 minutes, and we were just speaking time 1 minute. When that motion expires, the chair is going to be like, are there any points of motion on the floor? And then you just go ahead and give. Then you raise motions again. The chair is going to pick, and then they're going to get voted upon. You're going to discuss them. Then let's say someone raises a motion for unmod. You'll have an unmod. This continues throughout the session, and it happens until you have a draft resolution that gets voted upon and accepted. And if you have two topics, then obviously first draft resolution either passes, fails based on the chair's perspective or your performances, and then you go on to the second point. Can you please? So since a lot of you have questions about position papers, I'll ask Akina. I have several position papers. I'll give you guys my own position paper from last year. That'll just make it easy for you guys.
Amar,
I am a
sorry to
private delegate.
interject.
Yeah.
Just while you're talking on position papers, delegates, we have uploaded a position paper outline on our
Oh,
website.
perfect.
So I've added the website link in our description box, and you can just look up like Lumen Society on Google and you'll get a website. And it's under the delegates materials tab, and that's where you'll find all the ROPs as well.
Sure, perfect. Thank you, Sakina. That just makes your job like 10 times easier. Just go to the Lumen website, go to the delegate the page, and then you guys get delegate materials page, and you guys get your position paper. Just take it from there. Right, it's similar to that, and you're good to go. Yeah, so the session has ended. There's nothing more to be given. I'm just responding to questions. Anyone who does not have any questions is free to go. If me and a delegate from another country are from one school are in the same committee, no.